You need that mic to be on.
Oh, I know. For this portion.
Oh. No.
So turn that one.
For the one issue.
6%.
And staying at 7 Wednesday afternoon, police say the suspect in this case believed to
And on, I think
It's
the
echoing.
situation.
It's only echoing on mine now.
Okay.
When you move to the presentation, then you're going to have to turn off the microphone, but move to the.
Perfect if we had a.
Oh, yeah. Would you like me to introduce you?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
There's arts and, we used to have.
Here.
Well, there actually used to be a fine arts program.
All right. Good evening, and welcome to our 8th and final Knowledge Unleashed public lecture. Tonight we have Yulia Shakarova, and she is giving us My Little Alien, Raising a Child with Autism Spectrum Disorder.
Thank you so much, Hugh. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me tonight. I'm very excited to share all the interesting and necessary information with you because it's one of the things that changed my life drastically, and I continue exploring autism spectrum disorder every day, theoretically and practically, and it's something that is extremely interesting and something that I believe can enrich the understanding about the world and how different people function and the diversity and how we can help different people with disabilities. But I would like to start with the territory acknowledgement. So Northern Lights College acknowledges that our campuses are situated on the ancestral and traditional land of many nations, including Denizah, Cree, Sachet, Dana, Saltu, Sekhenek, Kaskadena, Tauten, and Tlingit. I've been practicing the whole day. We also recognize Métis Nation members who share a deep history with this land. We at Northern Lights College commit to restoring and honoring the truth and reconciliation calls to action. We strongly believe that truth must be acknowledged to move forward to reconciliation. We're grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. We acknowledge our hosts and honor their gracious welcome to those seeking knowledge. Okay, so let me begin with the question. Do you know anyone who has autism? A friend of a friend, a family member, a friend of a family member, anyone? If so, raise your hand. Show me your raised hands. Interesting. Unfortunately, that's what I've expected, that I will have at least few people in the audience who has somebody in their life with autism spectrum disorder. I would like you to meet my son, Timothy. He's 6 years old, and he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder when he was 4.5. He's nonverbal, and he has a mind of a 3-year-old child, but he is a full-time first grader who has morning and afternoon support and who is quite successful in his academic journey so far. I call him my little alien, and there are quite a few reasons for that. For one, he speaks his own language. It's very interesting. It doesn't sound like any other language in the world, but he really appreciates those people who try to speak his language with him, try to imitate the sound, try to connect with him, and he really is excited about having those people in his life. The second thing that is really interesting is how fast he learns different alien languages that he sees in different videos and cartoons. And for example, these guys right here, you can see they're called Kumi Kumi. They have their aliens and they have their own language. And for example, one of the words in their language is danger, that is baduga. Tim learned how to say danger in their language, and whenever he feels that he is threatened by something, he's like, baduga, baduga, and it's quite exciting too. The other evidence is that sometimes he seems kind of disconnected with the current environment, but it at the same time feels that he's connected to something bigger out there with the universe through little and big objects, and it might be another evidence of his alienism. And he also reacts to different objects, pictures, music that is connected in some way to outer space really, really well. His favorite song is Zoom, Zoom, Zoom. He can say rocket, like every time he sees a picture of a rocket, he would be like, rocket, rocket, rocket. And my demonstration material, do you recognize this guy? Yoda, right? So last year we went to Disneyland and he seemed really uninterested in everything. He liked the rides, but when we decided to bring some souvenirs, to buy some souvenirs, my daughter, she's neurotypical, she wanted to have everything. He seemed like he's not interested at all until he saw Yoda. He saw Yoda, he started hugging it, and he even repeated Yoda right away. I'm like, that is the evidence, he's an alien. He's for sure connected to the outer space in some way. So for sure, he is a very interesting boy and he brings a lot of interesting things to our life. So if you know someone with autism, can you relate to any of these examples? What are those that you can relate to? Disconnection, different languages. Okay, interesting. People on Teams, you don't see, but I can see nodding in the audience present here. So it's quite interesting to observe that there are certain common features among people who have autism spectrum disorder. I know at least 2 other people who call their children with autism my little alien. While I was prepping for this lecture, and I decided to go with the name My Little Alien because that's how I call him almost on a daily basis, I started searching and I found this book by Jennifer and Joshua McCartney, who are describing their life with their autistic son who's been diagnosed with Asperger syndrome. And they describe his life from 0 to 24. That's when the book was written. And they provide a lot of interesting points, examples from their lives, what they learned, how they guided him through different systems. And it's quite interesting. This one is the next on my list for sure, but they call him My Little Alien as well. So if you want to access it, it's available on Amazon. I have already it in my basket, so I'm waiting and I'm pretty excited. My child does not have Asperger's, but it would be interesting to see their perspective anyways, and maybe something I will learn from there too. So I will move on and I will start talking about some sad facts about autism, unfortunately. There are quite a few people who are aliens in very sad sense of this world and who live with ASD, autism spectrum disorders, all over the world. When I mention to people that my son has autism, almost every other person tells me, oh, we know somebody with autism too. We have a family member. That's why I asked this question at the beginning, because it's becomes so common to see, and that's what strikes me every time. How come? We just recently had new neighbors move into our neighborhood, and I met them, and I mentioned that my son has autism, so that they're not surprised. I'm like, oh, we too. We have the daughter with autism, which was quite, I'm like, oh, great, but not great at the same time. But the statistics is very unfortunate. According to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention in the United States, in 2023, they were registered every 36 child has autism spectrum disorder. They were diagnosed with it. 1 in 45 adults have autism spectrum disorder as well. In Canada, these statistics is a bit more promising. It's 1 in 50 children or adolescents, but there is not much information about the adults. With adults, it's a bit more complicated to diagnose autism, and many of them live without diagnosis, knowing that they have autism and probably can categorize themselves, but they've never been registered to be added to that unfortunate statistics. Interestingly, we can see certain explosion of autism within the last couple of decades. So if you look at the statistics, again, it's taken from the data of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. In 2016, just 8 years ago, it was 1 in 54 children. In 2014, it was 1 in 59. In 2006, it was 1 in 110. And in 2000, it was 1 in 150. And of course, a part of the explanation refers to the fact that the perspective on autism has changed drastically within the last several years, because there were more symptoms added to the autism spectrum disorder, and we're going to look about the historical perspective of the research developments on autism. But at the same time, these statistics scares me. Do we already have a new epidemic or maybe even pandemic that is trying to destroy humanity? Like, why does it progress so fast? These questions are extremely important, and they bother me because I meet those people almost on a daily basis, and I wonder how we can change this situation. There are other information that is also available on autism. It's about gender and race, and it's also taken from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And they say that autism is 4 times more prevalent in boys than in girls. And also that it's less prominent in white children than in any other ethnic and ethnic and racial groups. But if you look at the percentage, it's not that striking, the differences, right? So autism can affect anyone, and that's an interesting part of this disorder that unfortunately has to be explored more and more. So I'll move on to the timeline and the history of research, and a part of the such a drastic change in autism numbers can be explained by the development of the perspective on the autism. So I suggest we to look at some numbers in there. The term autism itself was used for the first time in 1908 by Eugene Bleuler, a German psychiatrist who used this term to describe a group of symptoms about his patients with schizophrenia. In 1943, Leo Kanner used the term early infantile autism in order to describe a group of children who displayed similar symptoms, and he was working in Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, which was quite prominent, and he had made some significant contribution, and we're going to mention his name again and again. In 1944, Hans Asperger used the term autistic psychopathy for high-functioning individuals with social deficit and who were struggling with establishing social contacts and bond with other people, but he was specifically interested in high-functioning individuals. In 1960s, research began in the understanding of how our genes and environment can affect the development of autism among different people. And in 1967, Kanner and some other researchers, they published an article that explored the environmental impact on the individuals with autism, and he was specifically talking about cold mothers who were emotionally cold to their children and could stem autism in their children. He used refrigerator mothers term, which was kind of offensive, but it is what it is. We're going to refer to that term again a bit later. In 1980s, autism entered the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders officially. And in 1987, youth symptoms were included, which is another significant part of autism research development. Specifically, it's interesting because Ivor Lovas, one of the pioneers of the applied behavior analysis, has noticed that behavioral therapy can actually improve the conditions of people experiencing autism in their life, and he started working on that. And today, as one of the ways to help with autism is ABA therapy, which is applied behavioral analysis therapy that is based on his studies. Quite interesting approach. In 1990s, autism was recognized as educational disability, and it seems that it's not that significant, but it is, because it gave people with autism access to special education and a lot more support in school systems, which is extremely important for people with autism. In 2009, I haven't included it here, but that's when the first study on the increase in numbers in autism was established by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And that's where a lot of researchers started being really interested in the problem, because what causes that striking difference? That's what's really important to understand that. And in 2013, the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders combined all the possible subcategories of autism that were developed and introduced earlier into one umbrella term, which is autism spectrum disorder nowadays. And it's really a spectrum, because when we see people with autism, they're all so different and they can be anywhere on that spectrum. We're going to talk about different levels of autism today and see how it is possible to locate those people on the spectrum, though it's quite problematic. Any questions so far? No?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
You said there was a difference between autism spectrum disorder and Asperger's.
Yes.
I thought that they removed Asperger's and just rolled it into ASD.
Yes, it is still a part of ASD spectrum. I'm going to talk about it a bit later. It's one of the forms. There are 5 forms that were historically introduced as a part of autism spectrum disorder. Some of them were moved off the spectrum. Asperger's is still a part of the spectrum, for sure. Thank you for the question. Any other questions? All right, let's move on. And let's talk about causes of autism, because it's probably one of the most interesting parts of why it's happening. So I would like to go back a bit about the importance of understanding the causes of autism based on the study published by CDC in 2009. So within less than a decade, the numbers of people who were diagnosed with autism increased by 176%, which is significant. And of course, researchers' minds started wondering what was going on. As I have already mentioned earlier, it might be partly because the spectrum includes so many different symptoms. Some of those are milder and they are still considered to be autism, and that's why we started including people who are experiencing different symptoms into the spectrum as well. However, there are other reasons that can be recognized as those that cause autism. A meta-analysis conducted by a group of authors concluded that the ASD, or autism spectrum disorder, develops from a combination of genetic factors as well as environmental factors, including social determinants. These factors appear to increase the risk of autism. That is another important component in here. They do not necessarily cause autism, but they increase the risk of development of autism in children. And it also, those factors can define the form that will be developed by a child. However, some genes changes that are associated with autism spectrum disorder might not necessarily mean that a child will have autism. And at the same time, sometimes children who are exposed to certain environmental factors that are considered to be causing autism spectrum disorder do not develop autism. So it's quite interesting. Autism runs in families. It's very unfortunate, but another meta-analysis that was conducted concluded that 60 to 90% of the risk of autism comes from our genome. And if a family, for example, has a child with autism, it might mean that they, unfortunately, might have another child with autism. There also might be tracks of autism in the family, and the changes in individual genome can also contribute to the development of autism. National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences identified various environmental factors that can cause autism in children, including advanced parental age, prenatal exposure to air pollution and certain pesticides, maternal obesity, diabetes, and immune system disorders, extreme prematurity or very low birth weight, birth complications leading to periods of oxygen deprivation to the baby's brain, and metabolic imbalances. So, being sorry, I need to move on here. Being a reflective practitioner, my mind, of course, started wondering what caused my child's condition. I started investigating my family. And sure thing, it turns out that my granddad on the maternal side had significant speech delay and also delays and also demonstrated some other indicators of autism. My dad, unfortunately, also has speech delays without any social deprivations. But interestingly, one of my cousins on my father's side has a son who was diagnosed with Asperger's. And the most interesting thing, when you look at the pictures of my son and his son, they look so much alike. Just like one and the same picture. I saw his picture and I was like, oh my God, where did you get Tim's photo? And it was Ed's photo. Quite interesting thing. So maybe environment. I started thinking about that. In the last trimester of my pregnancy, I experienced severe iron deficiency, and I was diagnosed with that and started taking preventative measures. For the first 3 years of Tim's life, he also experienced significant iron deficiency. His iron was 6 times lower than it was supposed to be for his age. So we started iron supplementation for him and increased the iron. Maybe I am a refrigerator mother, remember the terms that I used to describe cold, emotionally disconnected mothers. I honestly started working less than 48 hours after having Tim, so maybe I did not establish enough connection, maybe I did not have enough bonding. So honestly, when I think about the causes of Tim's condition, they're clear as mud to me. I have no clue what caused them. Everything could be a combination of different factors. So one of the most acute questions that should be considered when we talk about the causes of autism, and it's very frequently asked questions by parents whose kids were diagnosed with autism, if vaccines cause autism. Short answer is no. In 2010, Andrew Wakefield lost his medical license and was barred from practicing medicine for the research as a part of the reaction on the research that he conducted about the connection between vaccination and autism. So Andrew Wakefield and a group of 12 authors, they conducted the research trying to understand if so-called MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella, may predispose behaviors and cause autism in children. And of course, the reaction was very interesting. And come in, you're welcome to come in. The research was extremely questionable. In the first place, there were only 12 subjects in that study, and the interpretations were also quite limited, and eventually 10 out of 12 of his co-authors, they withdraw their interpretations, and it led to the result that he has lost his medical license. But after some digging, I found, believe it or not, 130 other research studies that connect different components of vaccines to autism. And the most important part that we have to understand here is that all of those studies, they do not see any of those components as the direct as a direct cause of autism in children. All they're talking about is the possibility of the risk of the development of autism. And another part of that story is that those studies are quite limited and have to have a lot of confirmation. So, for example, the study by Verstraeten, Davis, Gu, and Defano demonstrated the presence of, I will need to read that, ethyl mercury containing thimerosal in vaccines could be the reason for increased risk for the development of autism, organic sleep disorder, and speech disorders. Now, the results. The scope of that research was 400,000 infants born between 1991 and 1997. And the research demonstrated that only in almost 3,700 the autism or developmental disorders were found. So it's less than 1%. And other factors were not investigated as well. So again, quite limited. The research openly states that it needs confirmation by other research studies. So nobody wants to lose their medical license or research license by publishing those research studies. I'm in. Okay. Any questions?
If the background rate is 2 to 3% of children, if only 1% is experiencing it, then anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we're saying that it's quite limited in its results, the interpretation of those results. And I didn't have time to read all 130 research studies on them, but eventually all of those consider different components of the vaccines, consider different symptoms and indicators of autism as the demonstration, but it's not proved that vaccines cause autism. That's what we have to remember. Why Wakefield's research was banned and why he had such severe consequences is because a lot of people, parents, stopped doing MMR vaccines for their kids. Because, I'd rather not to take the risk if any of that exists. So that is why we need to recognize that vaccines are not causing autism. It's better to have our kids vaccinated in order to prevent more drastic consequences if they're not vaccinated. Any other questions, comments? That's one of the most challenging questions. Every time I talk to somebody about autism, like, was this vaccines? I'm like, no. Okay. So let's move on and let's talk about signs and symptoms of autism. And I have lots of text in here on these slides because there are lots of those symptoms and signs that can indicate or can be considered red flags in children. And for instance, most of the kids, let's start with that. When they have autism, they struggle with a lot of different things. But primarily, we're talking about social communication and interaction skills. And we also talk about so-called restrictive and repetitive behaviors that can be red flags for autism. So social communication and interaction skills indicators include the following. Kids with autism often avoid or do not want to keep eye contact with people. It's very hard. It's a huge struggle for them. And unfortunately, it happens so that people just feel that it's weird. but it's a part of autism. They do not respond to their name by 9 months of age, and sometimes even longer than that. They do not show facial expressions like happy, sad, angry, or surprised by 9 months of age. They do not play simple interactive games like pat a cake by 12 months. They use few or no gestures by 12 months of age. For example, they don't wave goodbye. And I noticed that, and with my son, it was one of the red flags for me, because no goodbye waving. Besides that, we are talking about not sharing interest with others. They are not included in the games with other kids. They do not point to show you something interesting. By a year and a half, they do not notice when others are hurt or upset by the age of 2 years. They do not notice other children and join them in play by 3-year-old. They do not pretend to be something else, like a teacher or a doctor, for example, by the age of 4. And they do not sing or dance or act by the age of 5-year-old. So quite broad spectrum, quite a lot of different symptoms. And I want you to keep in mind that not all of those might be manifested, because my son could sing for sure. And he still sings like really, really well. He is a singer. He does not speak, but he can sing the whole song, believe it or not, with words, distinct words. So another group of symptoms and indicators is restricted or repetitive behavior. So for example, kids with autism often line up toys and other objects and get upset when order is changed. When I observed my son, he knew his alphabet, his ABCs, by the age of 1. And he was so excited to put them all in order. And I was so excited about it. But if you take one letter out, he gets upset. Okay? If he sees the numbers, he wants to have them in line. If he sees some sort of a pattern, he will have that pattern recognized. So quite interesting. They repeat words or phrases over and over again. It's called echolalia, and it's quite interesting, and I observed it in my son as well. He would get stuck with one word. It's not a case anymore, but when he was younger, it was always a thing. He would remember one word and he would say it over and over again, or he would sing songs, his own songs in his own language with the same pattern. One of my favorite, and I probably will remember it forever, it's ta 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 ta, and he could sing it all day long. It was repeated one after another, not a mistake in pace, not a mistake in tone, just repeated one after another. So it plays with toys the same way every time, no alternation, it's just one specific way. If plays, it's focused on parts of the objects. That's a big thing. That's what I also noticed with my son. Whenever he gets a toy, you know, kids, when they get a toy, they will be excited about the toy itself. My son would take a wheel of the car and would play with that wheel and walk around with that wheel and try to manipulate the wheel, but nothing else. So they get upset about minor changes. It sometimes happens with kids if you have something out of their routine or change something in their environment, it might upset them drastically. I've multiple times seen when my son would want to have specific objects in specific places. And it was almost absurd thing. Sometimes he would not allow us to move anything because it causes instant meltdowns, and we don't want to have those consequences. So if you come to my house and you see weird objects everywhere, there is a reason for them to be there, right? They have obsessive interests, and that often happens, and my son is the worst in it. So his recent obsession was these two decorative spoons. I'm not sure if people online will be able to see that. So he was obsessed with them for 2 days. And if you look at them, they are quite sharp on the other edge. Yeah. So he likes things in pairs. You know, like some parents, they buy similar toys, the same toys for every sibling in the family. I have to buy 3, though I have only 2 kids. Why? Because if I buy only 2, he will try to get it from my daughter, and my daughter is not happy with that. And it causes the whole consequences for the family. So we've got to buy everything in 3s. he must follow the certain routines. Definitely, it's really important for kids with autism. If something changes in their routines, they might struggle with that a lot. Have you heard about steaming? Steaming. Yeah, kids with autism, they often flap their hands, they might rock their body, and they spin in circles. That's called steaming, and it's some sort of self-regulation mechanism. When they feel uncomfortable in their environment, something is going on, they start doing that, and it helps them to calm down. What's very interesting, my son didn't spin, but he liked running in circles. And, he would take one object, for example, a piece of a winner, put it in the middle of the room, and would run in circles around that. That was another red flag that told me that something is going on there. We need to investigate it further. So he was running in circles, and that's a part of his stimming as well, just to regulate. If he doesn't like that environment, it helps him to ground himself to an extent. They might have unusual reactions to the way things sound, smell, taste, look, or feel. And again, it's just part of the symptoms that can occur among kids with autism. Other indicators: delayed language skills, delayed movement skills, delayed cognitive and learning skills. Kids with autism can be hyperactive, impulsive, and inattentive, demonstrate inattentive behaviors. Unfortunately, some kids have epilepsy or seizure disorders. They have unusual eating and sleeping habits. That's an interesting story. I communicate with quite a lot of families in the community who have kids with autism, and our habits are so interesting. We share, and my kid, for example, has a habit of eating, or eating preference, let's put it this way. He only needs his soup blended. That's the only way he would eat that soup. So we always have a blender. We have to take it everywhere with us because it's his eating habit, and we cannot do anything about that. Gastrointestinal issues, for example, constipation, can occur. Unusual moods or emotional reactions. So very often I hear from his support or from his teachers that Tim's been off today, which means that he had very unusual mood. And believe it or not, kids with autism react to changes in mood, changes in weather a lot. Wind is not our favorite thing. We have to have our ears covered so that the pressure does not affect the perception. Anxiety, stress, and excessive worry can be a part of autism as well. Lack of fear, or more fear than expected. Lack of fear is probably worse, because my kid has lack of fear. He's not afraid of anything. He is ready to go for any sort of danger. And that's why we have to be always on guard, just to be prepared for whatever is going to happen there. So quite interesting. We've got to remember that autism is actually a neurological condition. It's not a mental issue. It's a neurological condition. MRI scans, they prove that the brain of kids with autism, people with autism, actually receives and processes information differently than the brain of non-autistic people. So we've got to keep that in mind. But unfortunately, quite often, this neurological condition is accompanied by the whole range of different mental issues, including anxiety and depression. For example, anxiety has been observed in almost 86% of people experiencing autism. Depression is also high levels among people with autism, so it's quite a significant thing to keep in mind. I really like the phrase, before we go to the levels of autism, that was stated by Dr. Stephen Shore, who is an autism advocate and who is on the spectrum himself. So what he said once, it was, if you have met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism. What do you think it means? Yes.
It means that each person with autism is different.
Absolutely. And as I've mentioned, I communicate with a lot of families in the community who have kids with autism, and they're all so different. Definitely one person, one set of symptoms. So we have to keep that in mind. Usually it's a combination of unique weaknesses and strengths that we have to recognize and help them to develop in order to be functioning in this society. So let's talk about levels of autism. Traditionally, there are 3 levels that are identified. Level 1, requiring support. In this case, kids with level 1, they are high functioning and they are just struggling with the initiating that social interaction. Organization and planning problems can hamper their independence as well, but they remain high functioning. Usually when we talk about the educational system, kids with level 1 do not get support. They just allowed to survive at school themselves, especially here in the north where we're struggling with support a lot, and I'll talk about it later. So level 2 requires substantial support. Social interactions are limited to notable special interests, and they're frequent, restricted, and repetitive behaviors. But these kids also can function and can communicate in various ways. Most of the kids at level 2 are verbal, so which means they can express their needs to their caregivers. Level 3 requiring very substantial support. Here we're talking about severe deprivation or deficit of verbal and nonverbal communication skills, great distress and difficulty changing actions or focusing. And there are lots of different behaviors that should be considered with level 3. My child, unfortunately, is level 3 because he is nonverbal and he is prone to self-injuring behaviors. One of the things that he does, unfortunately, is banging his head. And that's where his care support staff have to be very careful because they have to hold him and prevent him and put him in safety if they notice happening this. So that's the classification. Types of autism, going back to the question about Asperger's syndromes and how it's became a part of the autism spectrum disorder. Kanner syndrome or autistic disorder is met in 1 in 44 people traditionally, like according to the classification given by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Kids with autism or people with autism have unusual speech patterns. I've told you about Baduka. Resistance to change, severe deficit in language development, lack of oppressiveness, attachment to objects, and this is a huge thing. Asperger's syndrome, very mild form, high focus on topics of interest, difficulties in socializing. Rett syndrome, it was originally a part of autism spectrum disorder, but it affects girls and is no longer considered a part of this family because it was related to the mutation of genes, and there are certain conditions that do not allow it to be classified as autism spectrum disorder. Pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, refers to problems with nonverbal and verbal communication, social interactions, and changes in routines, repetitive movements and behaviors, unusual play, but at the same time, it's different from autism syndrome because there are certain conditions that do not meet the criteria of autism. They can communicate, for example, in certain ways. Childhood disintegrative disorder, very rare, 1/7 per 100,000 people. Loss of motor skills, play skills, bladder, bowel control, self-care and socialization skills, language skills, very rare condition. And it's a part of the autism spectrum disorder, but it's not referred to very often just because we don't see it frequently. Okay, though I know one kid having it. Okay, any questions about the types or levels? All right, let's move on. Challenges that kids with autism experience very often. Okay, one of them I have already mentioned, anxiety. People with autism, though it's not a mental health issue, it's a neurological condition, but they experience that mental issue related to anxiety. As I've mentioned before, about 48 46%, sorry, people with autism experience anxiety of different level. It's hard to deal with change, and it's really important to have transition planning. Now, I'm going to refer to my own experience and my own challenges. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions. First question, do you like long weekends? Everyone likes long weekends, right? We have extra day there. I hate them. Why? Because it means change of the routine. My child does not know the days of the week. He cannot name them. He cannot say that today is Friday, but somehow he has an internal calendar that tells him that it's Monday or Friday, and he needs to be at school, and something is wrong there. So, and all the consequences apply. He becomes very upset. He might steam a lot during the day, and we have lots of meltdowns a day. So that's why I don't like long weekends, or spring break was horrible too, so that you know. Okay, have you ever been hungry? Like hungry, right? Sim takes that to a new level. If he doesn't get his snack, we can have headbanging, can have like huge meltdowns, and he won't calm down for hours after that. That's why we have changed our routine. The first thing we do when we get back from school, we give him some snack. Otherwise, it might be challenging. When you go to a playground with your kids, what do you usually do? You let them play, right? You might talk to some other parents, you might socialize. It's a typical thing for parents to go to the playground, let the kids play together, and moms will be socializing. Another thing for us, my boy is a runner, he escapes. So we are continuously like guardians on patrol watching him, because every chance he will escape. Last year we had an incident where we had to call a police just because he decided he was going for an adventure. He opened the door and left to the art gallery. And yeah, we could not find him. And you know that during summertime, our art gallery parking lot is super busy because everyone stops and takes their pictures. I wasn't on the scene, I was at home. Don't tell anyone, but I drove really fast through the town to get there, and I got there before the police. He went to art gallery because he remembers that there are circles and he can run there. And I, like mother's instinct, I just went straight there. I'm like, my child is here. And sure thing, he was just enjoying his loops. So quite interesting thing. Another challenge that we have is sleep. You probably have your morning start at certain times, right? 7 a.m., 8 a.m., different at during the weekdays or weekends. Mine is unpredictable. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., sometimes 8 a.m. if I'm lucky enough. I've been used to it. I have a habit of not sleeping. And when people ask me how I manage everything in my life, the answer is simple. I don't sleep. Almost like I sleep 4 hours a day in the best case scenario. So it just became one of those habits in there. I've added to the list of the challenges yesterday because I've shown you those little spoons, right? And I mentioned that they have that sharp edge. So have you ever tried to put stitches on your kid? Right? It was kind of, it's usually not a pleasant experience even with a neurotypical kid. I had my daughter's lip cut at some point, and we had to go to the emergency and put stitches, but it was doable. We had to sedate him completely because he had a big cut on his forehead, and unfortunately there was no way he would let anyone touch him in the medical emergency room, and we just spent there the whole day yesterday. So no objects, especially dangerous objects, in his hands anymore for sure. That is why he saw this yesterday, and he was so excited to see them after the incident. And I just put them away and saying, no, I'm not keeping those things at home anymore because he might become obsessed with them again. And of course, friendship. Friendship is a big thing for kids with autism, and it's one of our challenges. my kid is lovable. Everyone in his classroom loves him. Everyone wants to play with him, but it breaks my heart every time I see one of his friends would come and try to hug him or to play with him, and he would be like, no. He's just withdrawn. He doesn't want to be a part of that. It's very unfortunate, but it's something that we have. One of the biggest challenges, however, is autism diagnosis. For every parent who faces autism and notices some unusual symptoms and indicators among their kids, sooner or later you have to have your kid diagnosed. Again, referring back to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, according to them, autism can be diagnosed before the age of 2. Average age is 5. Early interventions are extremely important for the kids with autism. My kid was diagnosed 3 years after the first referral, and it was harassment of Northern Health to the point that I need to have my kid diagnosed. I did half of the reports from specialists because you need to go through occupational therapist, speech and language pathologist, pediatrician, and several other specialists. So I did half of those privately, and the last one for the psychiatrist, I honestly simply exhausted all my funds. I didn't have money to go privately. So I was literally harassing Northern Health, calling them twice a day sometimes. I need you to set an appointment for him to be diagnosed because he starts school in September. I want him to have support. Sure thing, 3 months later, after harassing and doing all of those, I have submitted all my reports. We got an appointment, and he was diagnosed 2 months before school, which was a significant win for them. But when I talk to families with autism, almost everyone goes through the same experience. And I only can think and regret about all those years that we could use in order to help him and to support that, maybe bring him to the level where he can function more effectively. But unfortunately, it is what it is. Okay, some people never get diagnosed. So let's keep that in mind too. Strengths. There are lots of strengths and lots of wonders that we witness every day with Tim. Again, let's go through the series of questions. Do you notice how long your kid looks to your eyes? Usually. I do notice that. If I count to 10, it makes my day. Just because eye contact is such a challenge, and he can do it now. And it took us quite a lot of training to ensure that this skill is right there. That connection that he ensures with you is something very special. And he might have preferences in the family. Sometimes he prefers me, sometimes he prefers his dad. And then you feel special if he connects to you the whole day. New words, huge thing. You probably remember when your kids said the first word, or you notice like nephew, whoever, any kids, we usually notice, those significant ones. The first word mama, the first word I love you. For me, it's every word. Oh, he said idea today. Fantastic. He said adopt today. Yes. And I can be happy for several days afterwards. Recently, I was super happy when he put his own socks on. Upside down, doesn't matter, but I asked him, can you go and put your socks on? And he comes back wearing his socks. It was just, I was happy for 3 days. Smiles for miles. I was telling everyone, my kid put on his socks, right? Those little wonders, we just have to appreciate them as much as we can. Again, it's something special in our lives. We just cannot deny that those kids are challenging, but what they give us back should be considered as a reward. And that's the only thing that actually helps us to be positive and resilient, okay? So, community engagement. That is the last but not least portion of my presentation today. Community engagement is extremely important. And we've started doing this work in Dawson Creek, and so far we're very fortunate to have a lot of support with that. We have to understand that kids with autism can be supported socially and economically. The first and very important thing is your physical and emotional support. okay? We've got to understand that those kids are not freaks. They're not brats. You know, I've caught those eyes on me and my kid trying to calm him down during the major meltdown. Many times people would look like, why wouldn't you do something about your kid? Well, I can't, right? It's just something that he is, and what defines his personality. So I cannot do much about that. And that's what I get from other parents as well. Don't look at us as we are freaks. No, we're not freaks. We are people. We deserve support. We can laugh. We can be upset. We can be hurt. So that's really important to keep in mind. We want to ensure equitable access to services. For instance, kids with autism have the opportunity to attend school, which is fantastic. And today we talk about inclusion at every educational institution. And we have the inclusion that ensures that kids with autism have equitable access to educational resources. But we live in the North. Probably everyone is aware that we have severe deficit of personnel in different areas. And unfortunately, there is not enough educational assistants who support kids with autism. And that's often a problem. Sometimes you would bring your kid to school and they say, sorry, there is no support today. What do? You take your kids out of school, which is unfair, which does not seem right, but it is what it is. So it's one of the things that we are trying to work with and advocate for. We need to promote autism acceptance. You know, they call April Autism Awareness Month. Let's change that. Awareness is one thing. We need to accept. It exists. It won't go anywhere. How can we support and how we can make a part of our lives autism? Community participation is extremely important. And for instance, I organized a small group of parents for kids with special needs last year. It's a fantastic group of individuals. We met at one of the seminars for positive discipline for kids with special needs, and we didn't want to say goodbye to each other because there are so many things to discuss on a daily basis. And we started doing things together, and now one of the projects that we have in collaboration with Call Cross Parent Advising Council is inclusive playground. We want to build truly inclusive playground. Last year, the city of Dawson Creek built a playground, 2 playgrounds that they call inclusive, one in King Park, the other one in former Rotary Lake. If you are in Dawson Creek, drive by and look at those inclusive playgrounds. There are tall structures that some of the kids with autism and some of the kids with disabilities will never be able to climb. So the idea with this project that we're pursuing right now is to create the awareness that we are here, please hear our opinion, what we want as parents of kids with special needs, what's important to us. So we have our first Autism Awareness Gala tomorrow, actually, so it's kind of exciting. And of course, I think that any changes that can happen in the community start with self-education. So I'm very grateful to all of you that you came tonight and you listened to me and you are more familiar with different aspects of autism, some of the struggles that parents can experience, unfortunately. But it's something that is extremely important, and I'm grateful for the intentions that you have. To finish this presentation, I want to show you a small excerpt, very short excerpt from a short film that is titled Every 88. This short film was filmed in 2015, and it was representing Russia on the 38th Moscow Movie Festival, and besides that, it got an audience award for the best composition, the best plot in No Barriers Film Festival that tries to include different creators and different directors to the field. So this film is especially important to me because it means that the perspective on mental health and neurodiversity changes in post-Soviet Union countries as well. I'll tell you a little story. Autism was not a thing when I was a university student. I took psychology, clinical psychology specifically in Ukraine in 2008, I graduated. One of my peers, she wanted to conduct her master's degree research on autism. She was declined because it wasn't a thing, right? People with autism do not have access to the same educational services. They have to be in special schools. But this movie shows that they actually start recognizing that people with autism, they are not mentally unwell. They are just different, okay? I will tell you, I won't show you the full movie. It's available on YouTube for free. You can access it whatever you want, whenever you want. It's just 25 minutes long. I'll just tell you a short story. So it's a story about a young fellow who was killed during the World War II. And he gets into a state of limbo, you know, when he is just waiting what's going to be his next Earth assignment, what's his destiny is going to be. And it's presented like a huge line where they stay and wait for a special person in there to give them the ticket in order to go back to Earth and get their next assignment, their reincarnation, if you want to call it that way. So he's waiting and waiting in line, and people stay there like those lost souls, not people stay there forever. Sometimes they come back as cats, sometimes as some sort of animals. Finally, he gets his ticket, and it has number 88 on it. And everyone around him starts looking so sympathetic and like, oh no, that's so sad. He doesn't understand what's going on. And one of the lost souls explains to him that it means that you're going to go back to Earth as a person with autism. So be prepared, it's going to be challenging for you. And he says, no, I don't want to go back to Earth as a person with autism. And he declines the ticket and goes back to the end of the line. Sorry. On his way back, he changes his mind and he runs and jumps into the ship that takes him back to Earth. So, and here's what happens. I need to work on the sound for a second. Hugh, what are we doing here?
Раз, два, три, четыре, пять. Нужны шпаргалки. Шпаргалки. Нужны шпаргалки. Шпаргалки. Нужны шпаргалки. Нужны шпаргалки. Шпаргалки.
Лауреат Филдсовской премии, чьи научные достижения будоражат умы современников и вызывают множество споров среди математиков. Прошу вас тепло принять его. А вот наше юное дарование. Проходи, Глеб. Позвольте представить вам человека, без которого не состоялась бы сегодняшняя конференция. Глеб Громов. Рассказывай, не стесняйся.
Спасибо, профессор. Но мне кажется, если я буду рассказывать, мы закончим через неделю. Поэтому... Внимание, слайды.
But in it's monitored. Thank you. More closely than in other parts of the world. Let's put it this way. Because as I mentioned, for example, in post-Soviet Union countries, not a thing, right? It seems like it's more prevalent in North America, but it's because of the monitoring. I'm pretty sure that it doesn't choose geographical location. That's what it seems like.
Is it fair to say then that really that increase in the statistics that you showed is really about diagnosis and awareness than an actual increase in the rate of autism?
That's what my point is about, that it seems like because the diagnostics here and because they constantly add new symptoms, even milder symptoms, to the description of the condition, and they include more and more people in that. So that movie is every 8 days. It's 2015. Today, it's every 44th. We can rename it. Ticket would be number 44 today. So, thank you. Yes, Sunny.
2 questions.
Yes.
I know these are 2 different things, to recognize a pattern and to have a pattern disturbed.
Mhm.
But has your son ever surprised you where he got a pattern and you were like, I did not see that? Is he good at pattern recognition as well?
Is he part of recognition?
Is he also good at recognizing patterns as well?
Oh, yeah, he does recognize patterns. He might not say that, but he will recognize them and he might get excited about those. Now, actually, he is on individual educational plan, and a part of his plan is to increase the number of objects in every pattern, because they started with 3 and now they are increasing up to 10. So it's quite significant too. Yeah. And what's your other question?
We learn with fear, but we also learn with hurt. Because there is a neurological condition. I'm asking if you've noticed that he also learns with hurt.
Oh, yes, big time.
Okay.
Big
Yeah,
time.
because if it's lack of fear, you're bound to get hurt at some point. But also, does he learn from hurt then or no?
Let's put it this way. For instance, he probably would not be excited to take this again. Though yesterday when I took them out of the purse, he was like, oh, my thing. Today I took them out and he was not super excited to see them. At the same time, he took a little tiny screwdriver for a toy and he was excited to have that one. So apparently his huge scar that's going to be there now on his forehead did not teach him to learn. Yes. Yeah. So head banging. Like sometimes he would have bruises on his forehead. Does it teach him anything? No. Even yesterday, believe it or not, he had like stitches on his forehead and I put a bandage on it just to cover them so that he doesn't pick on that. He got upset when I tried to take his shirt off, and because it was all in blood and everything, I just wanted to get rid of it. And he was super upset with me and he tried to run to the wall and hit his head. So it hurts, it doesn't hurt. He has lack of fear for sure. He's not afraid of things. Just goes to them. Thank you. Any other questions? I think there were some questions.
No, it was just, they couldn't hear the sound.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I have a game for you then. You don't have questions to me, I have questions to you. Okay, I want you to take your mobile devices, if you have them, and join a small game about myths and realities of autism. People online will also be able to join it. It's Kahoot, if you're familiar with it. Yeah, okay. So it's a Kahoot game, and you're going to, where is my game? There we go.
Make sure to share that screen.
Okay, just a second. No topics, I want my games. Oh, there we go. Okay, so if you're familiar with Kahoot game, you will have to Google Kahoot, and I will share it with the rest of the group who has joined us online. So let's see. There we go. Okay, online people, give me a thumbs up if you can see the game. Do you think they can see it?
No response yet.
Wait to sign up.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So I will start the game. You don't need to sign up. I will start the game, and all you will have to do is just to enter PIN.
Oh.
You don't have to download anything. You don't have to sign up. You just have to have a PIN there.
Yeah.
So Kahoot recognizes two things: accuracy of your response and speed of your response. So you've got to be fast and accurate with that. Okay.
Yes, they can see it.
Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to host it live. Give it a second. And I have a prize for it. Don't forget.
Oh.
It's a little swag bag with different autism stuff. So you can either use,
So we don't need a pen.
you don't see that? Do you see that?
No?
I wonder why.
So go host live, I guess, on the, yeah.
Yeah, it's here. No,
Sharing the
share
room.
this step. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Sorry, technology is great.
Yeah. So what do we do? Yes, I just. How do we answer that? How do we answer it?
So at school, how they have different for everyone.
Do you wait for everybody? Is that, and then you hit start? Oh, I see what's
Yeah,
happening.
I'm just waiting for everybody
Gotcha.
to join.
Okay. No, it's fine. You just hit done.
Okay, everyone who wanted to join, join. Yeah. Give it a few seconds. I have 10 people. It's already progress. Cindy, you don't want to? Do you want my phone?
Not really.
No.
I just want other.
Tara's got a second phone.
Tara has a second phone.
I just want
Tara's got a second phone.
You guys can be on your phone and I'll dance.
There you go.
Okay, let's wait for Cindy.
Great. You want to know if I can use this? What? Why? Thank you, honey.
There you go.
Done? Okay, I'm starting the game.
Oh, look, I was an alien. Oh, no, it's an astronaut. It's got a helmet.
First question, autism is a mental health condition. True or false?
False.
It's right. Good job, 9 people answered it right. Okay, Hugh and Kaylee, good job.
Yeah.
True or false? Autism mainly affects young children. Ooh, it's interesting. Now, autism does not recognize age, does not recognize ethnicity. Everyone can have it. You and Kylie, you're killing it.
Video game fingers.
Yeah.
Autistic people like to be on their own. They are antisocial. Many autistic people love being with others. Even my kid, he loves being with other people.
Interesting.
Yeah, he doesn't like to be alone. Having autism does not necessarily mean a person has a learning disability. Good job! Yay! Autistic people can show empathy. Nine out of 11, still great result. Yes, they can. My son, when he sees somebody crying, he comes and pats them on the back, sometimes cries with them, but he does that. Autistic people always have other conditions. Not necessarily. Sometimes it's just autism. My son is perfectly healthy, except for neurological diversity. Seems like you're unbeatable, guys. All autistic people have special skills. Oh, almost equal. Not all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes they are gifted, sometimes they're just regular folks. All autistic people are the same. Come on, you should answer that right. Yes. Boys are more likely to get autism than girls. Yes, that's true. 4 times more likely to get it. Autism can be cured. Well, I'm thankful for one optimistic person who answered yes, but unfortunately it cannot be cured. You can bring autistic people to a certain level of functioning, but you cannot cure the condition. Again, because it's neurological, you cannot change how their brain functions, at least for now. Who knows? Technology develops, medical field develops. We don't know. Okay, ta-dam!
Another game.
No. Third place, Sanki, good job.
Yeah.
Scott, second place, yay. And who is the winner? You and Kylie. There you go. Congratulations. Here's your prize, guys.
You're literally 8 points ahead of me.
I learned that by about question 7, if you match the screen.
Yeah. Mine was slow coming up, so I was really slow.
All right, that is it. Thank you so much for joining me tonight once again. If you don't have any questions, I was glad to spend this evening with you, and hopefully you've learned something about autism tonight. Hey.
Thanks, Julia.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Very much.
Very good, very good.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, I'll stop sharing, and I probably can stop recording.
Yeah, probably.
There.
Stop recording.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you will join us next year for our next series of lectures.